Hi, my name's Peter Coffin, and you're watching Movies Wrong.
Inconceivable!
Yes, I'm sorry to say it, but every time you hit the play button on one of them things, you're doing it wrong.
You're just not thinking fourth dimensionally.
Right, I have a real problem with that.
There's this website called Letterboxd, filled with evidence that people are watching movies wrong. But don't fret, dear viewer, it's not your fault. You're not watching movies wrong because you're stupid. You're watching movies wrong because they're making movies wrong. How, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. And I'll also tell you what could change in order to make it better. How's about that? I was compelled to make this video when I saw that Furiosa was projected to make $85 million this weekend and only made 30. And despite the fact that, to me, this film looks like a bad Disney sequel, you know, the ones that you find in dollar bins, like Aladdin 6, The Search for More Wishes or something, a pale imitation of the original film out to make money on the name. Even though, to me, it looks like shit, a lot of people enjoyed it, just not the amount of people that they needed. Here's a tweet from The Quartering speculating as to why. Furiosa was the worst performing film for Memorial Day weekend in 30 years. It needs over $500 million just to break even after marketing. Despite great reviews, it made just $31 million and barely beat a Garfield movie nobody knew about. People are sick of female protagonists. Now, it is true that this is a film with a female protagonist. That's definitely true. And it is also true that there are a lot of those lately. But is that really why Furiosa isn't going gangbusters? So films, like with any piece of art, are designed to say something about the world, about the human condition, about society, about life, about a person, about feelings, about something. Terminator is not simply a movie about AI destroying the world. It is a time travel movie, and pretty much all time travel movies are about control, specifically things that you cannot control and trying to assert control over them. The Matrix is about a world in which artificial intelligence has taken over and enslaved humanity. Yes, that's true, but it's really about propaganda. Who controls the medium that you are getting information from? What is between your vision and the real world? And I guess to throw one in that isn't about artificial intelligence, Children of Men it's not just about like a what if scenario with a dystopian future. It's very much about immigration. But people have kind of been trained not to see movies that way. In fact, people have been kind of asked to look at movies as what if scenarios and judge them based on if that what if is interesting or cool or fun or whatever. Wouldn't it be scary if aliens invaded the Earth? So the dichotomy that I'm going to use to talk about this is allegorical versus hypothetical. A hypothetical is just a speculative scenario, like asking, what if we could do X? Or what if this thing happened? What if we started putting boobs in movies again? I think there's going to be a number of people who believe that the reason Furiosa did not do well is because Sydney Sweeney did not play Furiosa in it. And I get it. Boobs are nice, that's true, but Sydney Sweeney is pretty overrated, and also I don't think that would have done anything at all. But what I'm talking about here, a hypothetical doesn't necessarily have to be connected with our world in any way, shape, or form. An allegory, on the other hand, is using a situation, characters, etc., perhaps even hypothetical ones, specifically to relate to aspects of the human condition, our lives, problems that we deal with, and say something about it. And just to be clear, a hypothetical isn't automatically bad. It's often used in allegory. However, the film industry has oriented itself towards the aesthetic. Their reputations and profits depend on their ability to successfully seed content. And the easiest way to consistently find and rely on trends is the aesthetic, the look, the surface level stuff about a film. For a while, superhero movies were automatically worth shitloads of money. And if you asked people, particularly the people in charge, what that was about, it was about the fact that it was superheroes, these people in silly costumes fighting crime and existential threats. But the fact of the matter is that The first stretch of those films had interesting things to say. They weren't just making them because they need to keep up activity on the cinematic universe that they had established. In fact, the filmmakers that were making them had to convince people to allow them to be made. They had stuff to say, and they thought that superheroes were a good medium to say it through. And I'm inclined to agree with quite a few superhero movies. And most of them came before the year 2016. The fact is, establishing fandom and expectations and all of those things create a situation where they're trying to tick all the boxes. So rather than asking, what are we saying with this movie? They're instead asking, what can we include that people will want to see? And they've been doing this for a long time. It happened before superhero movies. Any genre or movement or whatever that gets over-commercialized, this happens to. You see, over-commercialized is what happens when fandom and expectations start happening. They commodify people's identities and communities, so there's a ton of emotional investment. And so that trends them away from trying to say something new or risk anything to make some kind of a point, and instead, again, trend towards that ticking of boxes. This used to be called sequelitis. Like, the people who are making the sequel aren't thinking about what they're saying when they're making a sequel. They're thinking about how can they replicate the success of the original, which means somebody goes through and takes a bunch of notes about certain things they notice and they try to reproduce them. The idea that the female protagonists of movies are automatically the problem is one that just totally misunderstands what movies are. Again, this is an entirely aesthetic aspect of these films. It's simply taking a visual piece of the movie and noticing it as part of a pattern. Instead of thinking about how that relates to society and ideology and the things that go into creating a film and the things that cause people to make the choices that they instead just say the aesthetic is the problem. It's very obvious that female protagonists are not the problem. The original Mad Max Fury Road is a fucking masterpiece. It has stuff to say about the world, about hope and redemption and being part of something. At the start of the film, Max is basically like an animal, and through his experiences, he once again finds elements of humanity in himself and begins to feel obligated to society in some way. He feels as though he is part of something. But that is, in my opinion, probably the theme that resonates most with me because I do so much work observing the atomization of society. In my books and my documentaries, a large part of what I do is considering the consequences of atomization in a neoliberal market fetishization of a society. That's one of the many allegories in the film, might I add. It's a pretty layered movie. And in making movies and emphasizing elements of movies that are not the allegory and not what the movie is attempting to say about the world, a lot of people are kind of being trained to not expect allegory. And therefore, a film doesn't have to do as much to satisfy. Well, surprise, surprise, conditions have changed and people are really sick of that shit. And we live in an age where distribution for a film, while monetarily it's a fucking mess, it's better than it's ever been. When YouTube was first happening, my belief was that it was going to help create a world that, because of the fact that equipment was getting cheaper and cheaper, more and more people would be making movies. More and more people with different varying stories from different walks of life. More interesting experiences would be shared. And to some extent, that is true. I see tons of stuff on YouTube that is both artistically filmed and not, that is sharing experiences I never would have had access to before YouTube. But just like with the film industry, they want people to watch a certain way. It's not supposed to be about meaning, it's supposed to be about the aesthetic. It's not supposed to be about allegory and talking about life, it's supposed to be about hypotheticals, seeing something that you haven't seen elsewhere. To return to Furiosa, we already have seen that. It's called Mad Max Fury Road. There very well could be allegory in Furiosa. I don't know, but the audience isn't looking for it. They're thinking, well, I mean, this looks basically like the same movie we saw before. And this returns us to the main problem. This allegorical versus hypothetical film art thing. We are in a version of the world that I described as what YouTube could possibly create. Technically speaking, you could make a film with your friends that's amazing and is very allegorical and says something about the human condition and put it up. Technically speaking, you could do it. But the gatekeepers, the people who have the ability to ensure that you are seen by many people, they have different agendas. They are attempting to promote and normalize certain behaviors in content consumption that allow them to make things in an easier way. That goes for YouTube, and that goes for movies. It doesn't really matter whether it's intentional or unintentional. They've trained people to watch those types of movies because that's their ideal audience. That's what they want to make movies for, because it's easier to ask the question, hey, what haven't audiences seen or seen in a while, than it is to ask the question, what can we say about the human condition? If we start making art that has meaning in it, if we create an expectation that art will have meaning associated with it, then man, oh man, does it get harder to make art as a product, something that you need to be able to mass produce and repeat. How are you watching films wrong? Well, I think you get it by now. You're asking, what am I seeing, rather than what is this about? And it's not because you're stupid. It's because nobody in their right mind would expect something different from a film nowadays. That's why when somebody does make a film that has a deep meaning to it, 100 people make video essays about it, and just in the most grating possible way tell you why the film is good. It's because it ticked something in the back of their head that said, meaning. Oh my God, there's meaning in the world. There's something out there for me. So how do we change this in any way, shape, or form? Well, firstly, the more immediate thing is, and it's going to sound corny, but do anything you can to financially support filmmakers. If they have Patreons, send them $5 a month. If you don't have $5 a month, tell everybody that you can about whatever they're already doing. It sucks that that's like the main option, but we live in capitalism. Capital is how you do things. The second thing is a little more long-term. End capitalism. No, it's not end capital. I mean, that would do a lot in terms of advancing the arts, but we have to come up with something that handles the distribution side of it. Like, we need to create some kind of way for people to see stuff that isn't the YouTube algorithm. And that's probably easier said than done. But the biggest things that we have to fight are atomization, the fact that there is really no community beyond Hollywood to connect filmmakers and people who want to see films. And then also the fan mode, which establishes the more consumer-oriented expectations, the box ticking, the aesthetic criteria that has been tied to a commodified identity and a commodified community. Obviously, these are not utopian answers, but in terms of getting stuff made, is money. Put money into people's pockets that you want to be making good stuff. Also, don't harp on people you donate to try to make something specific. Like, just let them cook. I am so happy that phrase has come about. It's such a simple way to say something. I think that's all I've got for you today, but what do you have for me? There's buttons down there. I want you to lick them, slurp all over them. There's a comment section. You can go down there and just fill right up. Also, money me at patreon.com/PeterCoffin. My documentaries, they're up here. They're good. I use the money that I get from Patreon to make them. And my short form videos are right here. They're good too. They're just a lot shorter. Like a lot shorter. Like the documentaries have been like 2 hours a piece for the last couple of years. So yeah, I mean, hope you have a good day. Bye.